Thank you, Sophia. And thank you in more ways than one, Sophia, for hosting. Lisa, David Guzman, Kaylee, all of you all have been very helpful. Tyler, and I'm very proud that you would even think to invite me to come to the San Jacinto battlefield and monument. By the way, I'm proud to say that I don't think I'm going to ever give another speech again. I am retired. I went out of here. I've got 2 books that are just about to come out. I've finished them. The publisher's got them, and but I don't think I'm going to write anymore. The wife says, "Yeah, you're going to write some more." And I said, "No, I'm not. I'm going to play golf." But of all the speeches, what an honor it is to be here. In Pasadena, in Deer Park, and on the San Jacinto River, and at the battlefield. It's a real honor. I'm also honored that so many of you all would come today because you're like me, you're dedicated Texans, and you just were crazy. Nobody, I don't think any other state, is more crazy about their state history than Texans. I think we have more people who write the history of their state in Texas. I'm serious about this. I know that our state historical association is bigger than any other state historical. Some states don't even have a historical association. And ours is as big as the National Historical Association. And that's what we are, and I'm pretty sure that's what brings you here today. That's what brings me here. Also, what brings me here is that as a Texan, I have learned my Texas history, but I've always looked for more. I've always wanted to know the background, Albert Seguin, direct descendant of one of the people that we're talking about today. I want to know the background. And I want to know my place in it. For so long in my life, being born in West Texas, Ozona, someone mentioned today, Ozona is a little town on the way to Fort Stockton, right? And that's in Ozona, is in Ozona. But no, you're right. West Texas, that's where I was born. And as a Hispanic in West Texas, growing up there in those towns all around West Texas, I worked cattle. I worked sheep, goats, cattle all over West Texas, Fort Stockton to Ozona up to Midland, and then going to school in West Texas. I never saw myself in history. And I learned all about George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Davy Crockett, and Travis and Houston, but I never saw myself or anything about me. And so I think that's what I've been doing all my life, is just looking for myself in my state as a Texan. I am a Texan. And I've always said, especially after having fought in Vietnam, I did fly, and I got shot down a couple of times, and my brother also flew. He was killed. He was shot down. But I always had the thought when I got back, wait a minute. The communist gunner that was shooting up at me, he wasn't shooting at a Mexican. And I started thinking, I'm not only an American, I'm a Texan. And I really do think like I went to Texas A&M. I mean, that's enough. You can send a Martian to A&M, and the boy would be yelling, beat the hell out of TU, and he'd be an Aggie. And so I think that's what I did as soon as I got back from Vietnam. I said, I want to go back to school. I want to learn, and I want to write, and I want to look for myself. I was very, very fortunate to marry Juanita Garcia of San Diego, Duval County, Texas. I mean, right in the heart of Texas. Juanita's family got here in the 1740s, and they show it. I mean, they're ranch people. They're land grant people way back to the 1700s. And I was so proud to finally claim her and adopt her family as my family. But I kept looking. And I think that's what I want to speak to you all about today. As I was going through, Lisa took me to her museum, which Juanita and I got back. We were in Europe a couple of years ago and going through a lot of those museums. And I told Lisa, this reminds me of some of the museums in Europe, in Madrid, in Germany. It's a very nice museum. And when we got through, we were talking, and I said, hey, wait a minute. I didn't see the Tejanos. Let me look at those paintings again. I'll be darned. You don't even have cavalry there. There's no cavalry. You know that Houston had cavalry, right? At San Jacinto. And you know that the cavalry was the Tejanos. I mean, it's the same true of the famous Battle of Puebla, and that we all celebrate, the Cinco de Mayo. Well, Cinco de Mayo, and you know probably as well as I do that we Texans celebrate Cinco de Mayo more than the Mexicans do. They probably don't drink as much Dos Equis as we do on the Cinco de Mayo either. But that's another fact, is that the Battle of the Cinco de Mayo is where the Mexicans defeated a bigger French army, and the reason they did it was because of the Tejano cavalry. A bunch of Tejanos went down to Mexico and said, hey, we're still Mexicans. 1862, they said, we're still Mexicans. They went down there and joined the Mexican army and helped to beat the French. So I immediately looked for the Tejano cavalry. I didn't see it. So what I'd like to do today is just talk to you all about that part that I didn't see in the museum. Because as Texans, you know very well we have German Texans. You know we've got the Czechs. You don't believe it? Go to Flatonia. Go to LaGrange. You'll see the Germans. You'll see the Czechs. We've got all kinds, Italians. We've got them all. And we also have the Mexican Texans. The ones I call the native Texans. The Tejanos. Tejano means Texan. It's just the way they said it for 150 years before they started using the word Texan. The way you say Texan was Tejano. A Tejano is a Texan. A Tejano is the first Texan. And I wanted to just kind of talk about those Texans, because when I read about Texas history, I read all about Santa Anna and the Mexicans and the Alamo and San Jacinto. Then I read all about the Texans, and it struck me, wait a minute, there's a lot of us here in Texas that are Hispanic. We're not Mexicans. We're not Anglo-American or European-American. But I don't see that in the history books. And so I just started looking for them in the records, and you will not believe the richness of the Texas archives. I would compare them to European archives. Maybe Egypt, maybe Mexico and China have got something a little bit more than we do, but we're right up there with it. Texas has got the richest archives, because we've got Spanish archives, French archives, Mexican archives, right here. And the story of Texans is in the archives of Mexico. If you want to read Stephen F. Foster, you've got to go to Mexican archives in Mexico City, because so many of them, he was Mexican. Stephen F. Foster became a Mexican, and his records, his letters, and everything else, they're in Mexico City. They're in Sevilla in Spain. You want to read about Texas, you got to go to Sevilla. So we have our archives in different places. We've got them in Washington, D.C., and that's where I've studied. Those are the facts I'd like to talk to you about. I'd like to talk to you about the real richness of Texas. I was talking to some people in the Alamo, at San Antonio at the Alamo on their 300th birthday. San Antonio, founded 1718. 2018, it was 300 years old. And they were talking about celebrating the Battle of the Alamo. And I said, hold, the Battle of Alamo was 1836. Now, if San Antonio is 300 years old, let's say 2018 minus 1836, there's something wrong with the math here if we're celebrating 300 years. And I started looking in Sevilla, and I found the rest of Texas history. That's what I want to talk to you about. Because it's not just political correctness. Oh, by the way, there was a Mexican that did this. No, I don't care about that. What I want to know is what really happened. When you write in the records, when you look in the archives in Washington, D.C., when you look in the archives at the Texas General Land Office, at the state archives at the Zavala Library next to the Capitol, what do you see written? It really surprised me, some of the things that I've seen written. Now, I was really shocked when I saw a letter. Dr. Nettie Lee Benson, my professor, rest her soul, there's a library named after her at the University of Texas, said, here, Andres, read these letters. And I says, these are in Spanish. It's, oh my God, Stephen F. Austin wrote in Spanish? I went on reading, and she says, read on, Andres. The records of Texas history are diverse. And they have facts that I want you not only to know about, you know about them. It's just we don't think about them. We don't think about the background of these facts. Texas wouldn't be Texas without the Tejano. The Longhorns were bred in Texas by Tejano ranchers. They didn't exist. Longhorns didn't exist. They're not from northern Mexico. They're not from Spain. Longhorns didn't exist until Tejano ranchers bred them, 6 million of them, in South Texas between Corpus, Brownsville, Laredo, and San Antonio. 6 million cows. I mean, even the Gobi Desert didn't have, the Africans didn't have that. Spain didn't have, nobody had cows like Texas had. It was the Tejano ranchers that bred the Longhorn. And the Mustang. The Mustang's not a wild horse. Wild horses they have in Montana. Wild horses they have in the Gobi Desert. Genghis Khan used wild horse. No. The Mustang, the Mesteño, is a unique DNA that was bred only in South Texas, and there were as many Mustangs as there were Longhorns in South Texas. And it was the Vaqueros who gave us the American cowboy. Ironic, huh? The Vaquero gave us the American cowboy. What do we call it? The Mexican Tejano Vaquero, Tejano cowboy. You're surrounded by this Tejano culture. And I just wanted this to show you everything you see today, all around you. You get in a car called a Pinto or a Bronco, and you ride down Alameda Street, and you cross the San Jacinto or the Colorado River. You go to a place called a rancho, sit on a patio, and you eat barbacoa. You're surrounded. Wednesday afternoon, oh, got to have my enchilada fixed. Let's go to lunch. Our food, our clothing. The cowboy, SMU Mustangs, the Spurs, the Ford Bronco, the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, just go on and on and on. That is what I'm talking about. It's not that the Tejano is missing, it's that we don't see the Tejano. They're all around us. The Mexican culture is all around us. It started way back in the 1690s to 1700s. It was formally established in 1718 with San Antonio, Béxar. Nacogdoches was there first. And so you have then the Spaniards coming into Texas from Mexico. Nacogdoches, Goliad, Victoria, El Paso, Béxar. They established their municipalities. And they established their lifestyle, their language, their religion. They were Spaniards. But the Spaniards that came all the way, hundreds of miles away from Mexico City, were so remote that they became different. The Tejanos began to think of themselves as different, very different from the other Spaniards in Mexico City. These people were fighting hostile Indians almost every day. These people had to learn how to use an escopeta, a shotgun, a rifle, a pistol, a dagger, to fight and defend themselves every day. And the people down in Mexico City didn't know what these people up here in Texas were going through. These people had to ride a horse. And so when the Spaniards would come up to Texas, they'd write back to Mexico City and they'd say, these people in Texas all ride horses. If one had only to cross the plaza, he would not walk, he would get on a horse and ride the horse across the plaza. And the Tejanos are saying, yeah, you guys are a bunch of pussycats out of Mexico. See, you want to see some... I want to tell you, you think that Texans learned how to eat enchiladas from the Mexican? You think they learned how to eat tacos and jalapeno? No. What Texans learned from the Mexican was how to brag. The Tejanos bragged. They boasted. Hey, we're faster than the Mexicans. Tejanos were a different people. They were all up here isolated, remote. They had not only the original founders, but they did breed. There was a count, the Count of Sierra Gorda, José de Escandón. The King of Spain said, look, I want you to propagate the Spanish culture and people. And I'm going to give you a proprietorship in the New World. Where do you want it? Escandón said, well, I want to do ranching. So he had an engineer go to Africa and go to Asia and all over Spain and South America. And engineer reported back to him, he says, hey, you will not believe the grasses in this area north of the Rio Bravo, the Rio Grande. The grass, he says, the engineer reports, the grass is up to my chest on horseback, and it stretches for hundreds of miles. You want cows? That's where you put them. So Escandón brought a couple of thousand of the biggest, most successful ranching families from Spain to South Texas. That is what Walter Prescott Webb called the cattle kingdom. That's where the Longhorns came from. That's where ranching came from. That's where the North American ranching industry came from. South Texas, not northern Mexico, not Spain. South Texas. And it's these people here who did it. Juanita's family is like I say, from that bunch of Spaniards who came here. They came straight from Santander to South Texas. Santander, Spain to South Texas. And they called South Texas Nuevo Santander, New Santander, just like New York, New Jersey, New Hampshire, etc. And they founded several towns, one of which is Laredo, along the Rio Grande. They got their land grants. These are the people that brought the Longhorn. I went to visit a rancher, a man named Enrique Guerra, rest his soul, who had one of the largest ranches in South Texas near Edinburgh. And I said, I want to see Longhorns, because he had This man, I'll tell you what he said. He says, Andres, you know, you heard about all the cattle drives and everything that, well, here, let me just show you. Escandón brought the his people bred the cattle, but you've heard about the cattle drives, right? The ones the cattle trails. What's the name of a cattle trail?
Yes, okay. Chisholm.
The Chisholm Trail, the Goodnight Loving. You know what towns did the Chisholm Trail and the Goodnight Loving and the Northern Trail? What towns did they go to in Kansas or Dodge City, Abilene, Sedalia?
Yeah.
Where did they come from? You know the city at the northern end. You know the people in Chicago who ate the cows.
And It.
What was the southern end of the Chisholm Trail? Did you know that one? It was a Tejano ranch called the Randado. The southern end of the Goodnight Loving Trail, those were the Tejano ranches. They didn't teach you that in the 7th grade. Where did the 6 million cattle, and Enrique Guerra tells me, Andres, they all took them on these cattle drives, on the cattle trails, and they ate them all, Andres. 1955, there's no more longhorns in I don't know, when was the last time you saw 2,000 longhorns? We ate them all.
Yeah.
1955, he said they were gone. No more. We ate them all. And he says it suddenly struck him, wait a minute. My great-grandfather got the land grant with Escandon on the north side of the river at Edinburgh, but he also got a land grant on the south side. We still have the longhorns on the south side at our ranch on the south side of the Rio Grande. So in 1955, Enrique Guerra took all of his ranch workers, brought back a bunch of the original DNA longhorns from the south side of the river, and he reinstituted the longhorn breed in North America in 1955. He certified them, and he's recognized as a person who certified and rebred the longhorn in the United States and North America. So I went to visit him, and I said, I want to see the longhorns. And I was thinking like the halftime at an Aggie and UT football game, that big old cow that gets out there and just stands there. So Enrique said, oh, you want to see the longhorn? So he takes me, and we see this guy, and I said, whoa, let's not get it out of the pickup. That's a longhorn bull, and that is very different from that little cow that you see out on the football field. These people could rope one of these animals by the hind hooves, around the neck, the horns only. They were the world's best vaqueros.
What?
They gave us the ranch, El Rancho Grande, Texas. It was born and created in Texas. They didn't have ranches in Spain. They had ranching, but they didn't live on the ranch. Tejanos are the first ones who lived on the ranch. It was a homestead. They gave us the open range. They gave us the concept of branding here in North America. The roundup, the rodeo, and the cattle drive. They gave us the North American ranching industry and all its institutions. They also had their very stable lifestyle. They had some of the largest extended families. They would have 300 people on a ranch, all of them the same family. Ranches were institutions in themselves. In order to enforce law on these remote ranches, all across South Texas, these people in Texas developed a unique constabulary that was mobile, that could go from one ranch to another, that could control and regulate the drives and also enforce law against cattle rustlers, hostile Native Americans that would raid and take the cattle. These people were called the Flying Squadron, in Spanish, Compañía Volante. Every municipality, San Antonio, Goliad, Nacogdoches, every one of them had a company, a flying squadron of local troops. Very highly mobile. They would travel from Laredo in about a month. They'd get up traveling 25 miles or so every day, patrolling actively, offensively, on horseback also, all the way up to Nacogdoches. Nacogdoches up to the Lubbock area, Lubbock down to the San Antonio. These people were always mobile. Every town had them. They were always out on active mobile patrol, searching out their motto was search and destroy. Perseguir y batir. When the Anglo-Americans got here, Stephen F. Austin said, now that's a good way to patrol, because they're patrolling the range. And the Tejano governor, when Austin got here, the Tejano governor said, right, and you have to set them up for yourselves too. You're required. If you want to have Tejano land, you have to have your own Compañía Volante. Austin did. He called them the Texas Rangers. They copied the boots in the saddle, the rope, the hat. They copied the Compañía Volante. They just have a different name. They enforced. There was a couple of things unique about the Compañía Volante. One of them is they could deputize under penalty of death. In other words, if they're pursuing someone, they can come up to anyone and say, you are hereby authorized and required to help me in catching and capturing this criminal under penalty of death. Either you come with me or you die. The other was summary justice. When they caught the criminal, they executed him on the spot. No trial, no bringing him back. That's one thing that they'd been doing ever since the days of Spain. They'd learned summary justice, execute on the spot. They learned that from the Arabs when the Spaniards fought the Arabs in the 7th and 8th centuries. These are the people then that began to conflict with Mexico City. They didn't like having to pay taxes to someone so remote who never helped them. They said, you never help us out. You don't send soldiers over. We have to protect ourselves from the Native American raids. These are the people then who, when Hidalgo declared Mexican independence from Spain in 1810, they joined as their own distinctive Tejano units against the Spanish army. Hidalgo, the man who started the Mexican Revolution in 1810, commissioned a Tejano, Bernardo Gutierrez de Lara, from one of those original towns on the Rio Grande, Tejano towns on the Rio Grande, Mier, as a colonel, and said, okay, you all fight the war here in Texas. So the Tejanos fought their own war, their own battle against the Spanish army in the Mexican independence against Spain. In 1813, the Tejanos, I don't know what, about 1,400 of them, a lot of Anglos joined them, a lot of Native Americans joined them, met just south of San Antonio, a superior Spanish army under a man named Arredondo that had 1,800 soldiers, but he also had cannon. The Tejanos didn't have cannon. When the Tejanos came onto the battlefield, within 2 hours, the Tejanos were completely annihilated. And they never forgot that. And they never forgot one of the lieutenants in Arredondo's army, a guy named Antonio Lopez de Santana, who fought with the Spanish army and not only killed that many Tejanos in the battle, but after the battle, they went and executed the ones who didn't die. And any of them that tried to escape to San Antonio after the battle, which took place right near Poteet, Texas, right near Pleasanton, Texas. And yeah, the Tejanos tried to escape to San Antonio. The Spaniards went, captured them, and executed them. And then they punished their families. Tejanos never forgot what the Spaniards did, and they never forgot Santa Anna. They continued to fight against the government in Mexico until finally they established their independence from Spain. And Texas was very proud. The Tejanos are very proud. But Mexico, when it established Mexico as a democratic republic, united Texas with its neighboring state, Coahuila. So they said, you two will be one state, Coahuila and Texas. The Tejanos never liked that. They did agree on the condition that they get to have their own representatives, their own senators, and that they get to keep their own lands. And I don't mean their own family land. They said all the land in Texas belongs only to Texas, and it does not belong to Mexico. We keep our own public domain, and we keep all the subsoil minerals on our land. You know why that's important? I don't know how many oil tanks there are within 10 miles of this museum. But if it wasn't for the Tejanos to insist on keeping their own public lands and their own public subsoil minerals, Washington, D.C. would own the oil in Texas public domain, like it does in all the other states. Washington, D.C. would own all the public lands in Texas, just like Washington, D.C. owns all the other public lands in all the other 49 states. Texas is the only state that owns its own public land and its own public subsoil minerals. Now, the Tejanos were thinking salt and sulfur. They weren't thinking oil. But in 1951, the governor of Texas, in a court case, U.S. versus Texas, said, Texas has always been Mexican, and we use the Mexican laws. Right. Texas is different because of oil and because it belongs to Texas. These are laws that a lot of people don't even think or know about. The governor of Coahuila, Texas, a guy named Viesca, Agustin Viesca, he was the first governor of Texas under the Republic of Mexico, a democratic republic. He could see, he was a liberal. He was highly educated. I went to his ranch home in Saltillo, just south of Laredo. And they had it was a large home. And they had a big, big room. And I said, wow, this must have been a big ballroom or something. They said, no, this was his library. This man read Rousseau. He read Voltaire. These people, and they said he's got a bigger library in town. They were very liberal. He wanted Mexico to become capitalist, like the United States. He wanted a trade economy. And he says, and you know what is the best thing to trade on in the world right now? Cotton. And nobody's got better cotton growing land than that place called Texas, right along the Balcones Escarpment, from San Antonio all the way up to Temple, Texas, right up to near Dallas, is the richest blackland soil in North America. And he said, that's going to grow our all we need is the cotton growers. And that's over in Tennessee and Kentucky. We need to bring those Anglo-American cotton growers to Texas. How do you do it? You give them 4,000 acres land free, no taxes, and can never be taken from you for law, for taxes, or for indebtedness or anything. It is your homestead. It is your home, your ranch, your land, your home, and your tools can never be taken from you. That is why they came from Missouri, Kentucky, Tennessee, because they wanted that land, 4,000 acres. And if you're married, it's 8,000 acres. These laws are the ones that attracted so many Anglo-Americans. The Tejanos wanted and invited the Anglo-Americans. That's why Stephen F. Austin came. And it worked famously. Texas became capitalist. Texas became the primary cotton growing state in all of North America later. Viesca was I always wondered, why don't we celebrate Viesca as one of the governors of Texas? He was the first governor of Texas. He's the one that brought the Anglo-Americans. I once asked that, and a person at the state capitol said, well, I know why. Because he was governor when Texas was part of another country. And I said, what the heck do you think Texas was when it was part of the Confederate States of America? Was that another country? We celebrate that governor. He's up there on the Capitol Rotunda. I've always thought Viesca ought to be. By the way, his great-grandson lives here in Houston. Viesca. Same name, Agustin Viesca, an engineer. The Tejanos are the ones that made themselves enemies of Santa Anna when he passed the law of April 6, 1830, trying to stop the Anglo-American immigration into Texas. When Santa Anna came to San Antonio and fought the Battle of Alamo, I've always said he wasn't looking for Davy Crockett. He was looking for Viesca. He was looking for the Tejanos. He came up here to get those Tejanos and punish them. He ran into Davy Crockett and the others, and the Tejanos got into the Alamo with Travis and Bowie and Crockett. But they were part of the Republic of Texas. Juan Seguin, who had a company of the Flying Squadron, he was a commander of one of the Flying Squadrons, immediately became part of the Texas Army. Seguin fought in all the battles of the Texas Revolution. I don't know how many Anglo-Americans fought in every single battle of the Texas Revolution. Seguin was in all of them. He was at the Alamo. He was in San Jacinto. Well, Albert, you know that. You're a direct descendant of Seguin, you know that. These people were part of the independence movement. They were at the siege of Béxar that took San Antonio. They were at the Alamo. They were in San Jacinto. Tejanos were the cavalry for so much of the Texas Revolution. And this guy here, Juan Nepomuceno Seguin, was one of the commanders. He was probably the biggest Tejano commander. You look in the actual records of the Republic of Texas here at the State Library, and you see Seguin's pension. You know, he fought on this battle, he fought on that battle, which is another one of the principles that Tejanos established. The Tejanos established the principle that if a person fights as a soldier for the Republic of Texas or for Texas, when he comes back from the battle, he gets a land grant. It's called a bounty or it's called a donation, and he gets like 640 acres or 4,000 acres, whatever, for fighting in this particular battle. That's what we call today the Texas Veterans Land Board. There's no such thing as a Kansas Veterans Lands Board. There's no such thing as a Minnesota Veterans Land Board. Texas is the only state that has a Veterans Land Board because the Tejanos started that, and the Anglo-Americans said, that's another good one we're going to keep. There's so many of the laws that we have today, education laws, land laws, water laws, that the Tejanos gave us. That is the difference between us and New Mexico, us and Oklahoma, us and, I mean, I've always said, you know, we've got the Texas Rangers because the Compañía Volante taught the Anglo-Americans how to have a Texas Rangers. And I always ask, you ever heard of an Ohio Ranger? Nothing wrong with Ohio, but they don't have Texas Rangers. This is the difference. These people, you take a person like Jose Antonio Navarro. You want a Texan? Compare William Barrett Travis to these credentials. Compare David Crockett to these credentials. This man's family founded Texas. Seguin's family founded Texas. They've got the credentials as Texans. And there's no doubting that William Barrett Travis is a Texan. Sam Houston. But there's no doubting either that this man is a Texan. He went through, in fact, like Tejanos, we talk about the Six Flags of Texas. How many people went through all Six Flags? The Tejanos are the only people that went through all Six Flags of Texas. Other people got here during the Republic. So other people got here during the Confederacy. Tejanos went through all Six Flags of Texas. And this is a perfect example of it, called San Antonio Navarro. Seguin's another one. So what is a Texan? How long does a person have to be in Texas to become a Texan? How long was David Crockett in Texas? And he's a Texan, no question about it. How long was these people in Texas? But how long was Seguin and his family in Texas?
1712.
And ironically, they're not called Texans. called Mexicans. What is a Texan? How long do you have to be in Texas to be called a Texan? At San Jacinto, Seguin, his cavalry, his old compañero volante. The Tejanos were right at the front. Jose Antonio Menchaca, one of the Menchacas, reported in an interview later after he was in the Battle of San Jacinto that the Anglo-Texans didn't know that they'd surprised the Mexican army. He said he came over a hill and he said, "Muchachos, they're asleep." And he said, "Ándale, muchachos." And the Anglos knew what that meant. He was part of the leading wave in the Battle of San Jacinto. Unfortunately, most of the soldiers in the Battle of San Jacinto were not native Texans, the Anglo-Americans. They did not distinguish between Juan Seguin and one of Santa Anna's soldiers. To them, they're all Mexicans. In fact, Houston told the Tejanos, "You better work hard in your hat so we'll know that you guys are on our side." But after the battle, the Tejanos themselves were harassed. Seguin himself, several assassination attempts when he got back to San Antonio. Seguin's the one that buried the heroes of the Alamo. He went back and he found and he buried the heroes, Crockett and the rest, at the Alamo. But he himself was almost shot several times. The Navarros were killed. Some of them were killed. Some of the Seguins were killed. And many of them were driven out of Texas in all different places. Houston had to issue an order: stop harassing the Tejanos. They are native Texans. They fought with us in the Revolution. And so that's the other side of this. That's the other reality of this that I've seen. I've seen a poster of Sam Houston that literally says, "Stop killing the Tejanos. They are Texans." We have these in the General Land Office and the State Library. Even laws were passed that allowed the persecution of Tejanos and the taking of their lands. And so Tejanos then were marginalized, not only from the economy, not only from the government, but they were marginalized from the history books that you and I read. They were taken out or set in the margins. And so a lot of us were brought up not even knowing, when in reality, the land laws that we have in Texas, many of the laws are written in Spanish today. A land lawyer in Texas has to know Spanish because we're still using the land laws, the water laws. A land law that, like I say, the Texas Veterans Land, the homestead protection. Texas had homestead protection. We still use the homestead. It's called the Great American Homestead. But look, the American Homestead Law is nothing but a copy of the Tejano Homestead Law that was propagated throughout the other 50 states. The United States uses the Tejano Homestead Law that was written in Spanish at San Antonio before Stephen F. Austin got there. So many of the provisions that we all rely on, homesteads and the protections of a homestead, they were established by the Tejanos here in Texas. One of the most important, like I said a while ago, the public domain of Texas, the subsoil minerals of Texas, and the other one was that the United States owns the land and the oil, rather, under the ocean from the beach out 3 miles. Texas has, out in the Gulf, all of the oil wells. That's our oil. And in 1951, the United States said, wait a minute, that's United States oil. And Texas' argument was, wait a minute, we use Mexican laws. We don't measure in miles, we measure in leagues. A league is 3 miles, even more. We own the oil 12 miles out in the Gulf. That's Texas oil, and that's what we're getting today. I've always said, if you want to know the difference between in what oil has done for Texas, drive on the highway from here to New Mexico, and when you hit the border, the highway has a little bump and the highway gets real narrow. It doesn't have shoulders. And their schools, they can't match. Hey, our Capitol is taller than the U.S. Capitol, and ours is in pink granite. Texas has the money. These are very important principles, the water laws that give us protection. One of the biggest that I encountered was community property. A woman under Anglo-Saxon law ceases to exist upon marriage. That's an English law that was in the United States until they got to Texas, and the Tejanos said, no, no, no. A woman in marriage owns as much as the man in the marriage. She can own the land. She can run the vaqueros. She can run the business. She can have a bank account. She can testify in court. She can sue, and she can be sued in Texas. When Anglo-American women got to Texas, and really it took them until the 20th century for Anglo-American women to get the full protection of the Tejano Community Protection Community property laws. But it's only because of the Tejano community property laws that today a woman can have her own credit card, her own check, her own bank account. And I don't think people know that. I was never taught that until I saw it in the actual laws. Another one that I saw, Tejanos did not put children in like Oliver Twist. You have an orphanage. They didn't have orphanages. They didn't have orphans. If a child was left without parents, he automatically was brought into a family in Texas. The Tejanos automatically and legally made that child part of the family. In fact, if a child was an orphan, he was brought into a family, and legally, if he were the oldest male, he inherited the land. There was no stigma to be an orphan. There was no orphans. There's no orphanages in Texas before 1821. Orphanages is like England and the Anglo-Saxon law. So when Sam Houston became a senator, he took this Tejano law to the U.S. Senate, and all of the other 49 states today use the Tejano law to adopt children. How many laws do we have that surround your life that are Tejano? The Tejanos had a vibrant community. They had their own culture. They had their own music. And like I said a while ago, they had their own pride. They served in the Texas Revolution. They served in the independence movement against Spain. They served in the Texas Revolution. They served in World War I. Juanita and I go to San Diego to the family plot, her family cemetery plot. Her grandfather, there were 10 brothers, and they were in all the wars, World War I, World War II, Korea. Tejanos got more combat decorations. If you want to see the Tejano contribution, go to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. 22% of the names on the Vietnam Wall are Hispanic names. The Medal of Honor recipients of the United States or of Texas, that's where you see the Hispanic names. You've got them here. Adame, Rocco. You've got boys from LaPorte, from Nederland, from Houston, Medal of Honor Hispanics. They've been in all the wars. So Tejanos didn't just back then have a vibrant community. They have a vibrant community today. Tejano music, Tejano culture. The only thing that's missing is, like the museum, It's up to us today to set the record straight, include all the facts, no propaganda, no fact, just facts. Facts about the battles, the wars, the laws. What is it that makes Texas great? What is it that makes Texas unique? I think Texas is unique. I think Texas is exceptional. I think we have heroes. I don't think there's any doubting it. Let's just make sure we include all the heroes. And when we talk about Texans, let's talk about all of the Texans. I worked for 12 years with a group of people in Austin. We raised $2.6 million for 12 years. And we put up one of the largest monuments on any state capitol grounds. It has 5 bronze plaques that tell in text basically what I've been talking to you about. We just wanted people to see at the state capitol where the Texas Longhorn came from. I had, as we were building it, I had a New York newspaper man come and interview me. He says, well, look, doctor, in New York, we put up statues to people. Why do you put up statues to cows? And I said, well, the first place is no other state that has longhorns, but the main reason is that if it weren't for cows, you wouldn't have civilization. There's a difference between having to go out and kill a deer every single morning to eat or having 2,000 of them on your ranch. You don't have to worry about where you're going to eat tomorrow. Wake up in the morning, you get to read a book. You don't have to go out and chase deer. Beef, protein. That's why we have a cow up there. And the Tejanos brought that. They brought the horses. They brought the sheep, the goat. They brought the wool industry. And more important than anything else, they brought the legal protection of the family, the head of the household, the protection of the household, the education, the fact that the government must serve the people, and the fact that the resources of the state must be for those people. That's what Tejanos gave us. And that's what I saw when I finally looked for myself in Texas history. I saw what my wife has with her family. They extend all the way back, a large family. And as her mother once told me, when I said, well, can you understand, mother-in-law, can you understand why one of your sons would maybe have a little bit of resentful feelings about his brother because of so-and-so? And my mother-in-law said, my son, Mijo, in the family, there is no resentment. And I realized, Walter Prescott Webb said that the Anglo-American cowboy came and saw 6 million cows in front of him on the Nueces River. And that created the American ranching industry. And I said, no. It wasn't the cows. It was the families. It was the Tejanos who came as families. We didn't have a Jedediah Smith by himself. We didn't have a Zebulon Pike that came by himself. Tejanos didn't come by themselves. They brought the whole family. And I'm talking 300 members of an extended family. So, Texas is a great state. I'm certainly proud to be a Texan. And I believe very much when I say, if anybody ever asks me for my citizenship card, I'm going to say it's in my hip pocket. I'm a Texan. Come and take it. I think we're proud. I think we're proud for a very good reason. And I think a lot of that pride, like I say, Germany, Czechoslovakia, Poland, England, Ireland, Mexico, Spain. Texans are a very diverse people, but we are all Texans. I'm very proud to be one, and I know that I share that pride with you. What I've been trying to share with you is nothing more than a few facts that, like I've always said, I don't want to change Texas history. I don't want to modify it. I'm just trying to enrich Texas history. And I hope I've done that for you today. Thanks.